Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's regular meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees for February 22nd, and which is Washington's birthday. Of course, our first order of business, we're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by a Gower West student. Her name is Alexandra Stasinski. Her favorite subject is science. Her activities are, of course, with Gower. She's on the Gower Band, Gower Chorus, Gower Science. She's on the Olympiad team. She takes piano lessons. She has a pet guinea pig named Hansi. Her family trip to Scottsdale, Arizona, she saw the Cubs in spring training. And her parents are Rich and Nicole. They're here tonight, and our grandparents are here as well. And she has a sibling named Jonathan who's in second grade. So we'll invite Alexandra to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance now.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Alexandra, dziękuję, and dobranoc. Okay, roll call.
Trustee Francis?
Here.
Trustee Grasso?
Here.
Trustee Baveza?
Here.
Trustee Bolas?
Here.
Trustee Murphy?
Here.
Trustee Schiappa?
Here.
Mayor Straub?
Here. Now for the resident comment section. Are there any residents that would like to address the board at this time? Marty?
I'm Marty Gleason. I live at 80th and County Line Road, and I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate my friend the mayor, who is also the Republican committeeman in the same precinct I'm the Democratic committeeman. And I'm sure I could speak for him and for me to suggest that everyone wants to remember that March 15th is the primary election that has some consequence in our lives, and hopefully everyone will participate. But more importantly, as I was once told by a professor at the University of Chicago, if you weren't prepared to study the candidates and study the issues before you vote and make an informed vote, you should stay at home and have the courage of your ignorance. This is an important election for the country and for the state and for DuPage County and beyond. And so everybody knows, and Karen Thomas can, I'm sure, tell everybody about the hours of the polling places. There's one here, one across the street. There are some in Cook County. But one of the things I was discussing with people is that on your ballot, both Democratic and Republican ballots, you'll see candidates listed under the term for President of the United States. That's a beauty contest. You don't get a single delegate, none of those people, some of them whom have already dropped out in both parties, that the real thing, if you're wanting to have a say at the conventions in this summer, Democratic and Republican, you need to make an informed view of what delegates you're going to be voting for, and realize that a good many of the delegate candidates no longer have a presidential candidate for whom they are pledged to support. So it's a little tricky, and pay attention. Thank you very much, and vote on March 15th. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. Are there any other residents that would like to address the board at this time? Okay, move on to the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the village board. It will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, at which event it will be removed. Under minutes, we have 5A, approval of regular board meeting of February 8th, 2016. 5B, receive and file draft stormwater committee special meeting of February 8th, 2016. 5C, receive and file draft stormwater committee regular meeting of February 9th, 2016. Under minutes, 5D, receive and file draft plan commission meeting of February 15th, 2016, and minutes 5E, receive and file draft economic Development Committee business breakfast meeting of February 18th, 2016. There's nothing under ordinances. Under resolutions, there is a 7B, adoption of resolution to authorizing a local public agency agreement between the Illinois Department of Transportation and the Village of Burr Ridge appropriating funds for the Garfield Street resurfacing project. Under considerations, we have 8C, approval of Plan Commission recommendation to approve special use to permit the construction of a building and parking lot for a dental office, Z01 2016, located at 16W 331 South Frontage Road. That's for Moelis. Under 8D, approval recommendation to purchase replacement residential water meters, fiscal year 2015-16, budget item. 8E, approval of recommendation to promote Cindy Pavlicek from Data Clerk 1 to Police Department Administrative Secretary effective February 29th, 2016. 8F, approval of Mayor Straub recommendation to approve Dave Allen to the Stormwater Management Committee. 8G, approval of request for raffle license for the Gower PTO and hosting facility license for Gower Middle School for event on March 11th, 2016. It's raffle ticket sales from February 7th, or 2/17/16 to 3/11/16. And 8H, approval of vendor list in the amount of $392,323.86 for all funds, plus $191,290.80 for payroll, for a grand total of $583,614.66, which includes a special expenditure of $51,323 to CDS Office Technologies for mobile data computers compatible with Newcom. May I have a motion to approve the following items on the consent agenda? That will be 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, and 5E. Ordinances 7B. Considerations 8C, 8D, 8E, 8F, 8G, and 8H. Motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Baveza?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
Trustee Bolas?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Under resolutions, we have 7A, consideration of adoption of resolution approving final plat Buck Trail Estates subdivision located at 7950 Buck Trail Drive. And Mr. Pollack.
Thank you. This is a resolution approving the final plat for the Buck Trail Estates subdivision. Buck Trail Estates is located at 7950 Buck Trail Drive. It is a 5-acre property, and the subdivision divides the property into 5 lots plus 1 stormwater detention outlot. The property is zoned R2B, and all of the lots comply with the R2B district, including an average lot size of 30,000 square feet, or in excess of 30,000 square feet per lot. Preliminary plat was approved by the board in 2015, as was the rezoning of the property. The purpose of the final plat is for the village staff to review the final engineering to ensure that the subdivision infrastructure is in compliance with village code, and to review the final plat to determine that the lots are in compliance with the zoning ordinance. Both of those reviews have been completed by staff. I have determined that the final plat's in compliance with the zoning ordinance and the approval of the preliminary plat. The village engineer has reviewed the engineering and determined that that is in compliance with all applicable village and county regulations. And thus, the final engineering has been approved. As a courtesy to residents in the area, and as we had promised at the time of the preliminary plat review, the Stormwater Committee reviewed, there was a public review of the final engineering plans at the Stormwater Committee on February 9th. Residents were invited, all the area residents were invited from the adjacent Burroughs Glen South subdivision, invited to review the plans with the Stormwater Committee and the village staff, as well as the developer's engineer. And those residents reviewed it and seemed to be satisfied with the stormwater management facilities that were being provided, as it was explained to them in much detail at that time. The developer is present, McNaughton Brothers Construction, and the developer's engineer, as well as the village engineer, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Trustees, questions of Doug or
I
Helper?
I do. We got a letter from a resident who's still concerned about her property being flooded or her deck having to be replaced again because of sinking. I read the minutes from the committee meeting, and it seemed like the issues were addressed. Can you speak to them and say that this resident will not have these kind of problems because the stormwater is being managed much better than it is now?
Well, that's exactly the summary of the improvements that are proposed, is that right now there is approximately 5 acres of this property that flows downhill onto and into the Burr Oaks Glen subdivision, and specifically onto the one residence, or a large portion of it onto one single property in Burr Oaks Glen South. As a result of this subdivision, there'll be a stormwater detention pond, which will collect 100% essentially of the stormwater that lands on this property. It will collect it, hold it, and release it at a controlled rate to the south into the Cross Creek subdivision stormwater system. So there essentially will be no stormwater runoff that goes into Burr Oaks Glen South. It will all be maintained on this property and directed to the south.
Thank you.
I guess I should ask then, if it's going to be directed to the south, Doug, is there any consideration that the south can't handle it?
The south, Dave Pricey can answer that better than I can, but I could, yes, I mean, the south can't handle it. There's a existing storm structure system in Cross Creek. The outflow from this pond will be piped underground into an existing underground pipe and into the storm system, the detention system in Cross Creek, and then into the creek that runs through Cross Creek.
Thank you.
And how many hours of analysis have been dedicated to this? Do we have any idea?
Well, they started the planning process in July of last year. The preliminary plat, after review by the village engineer and review by the Plan Commission and Village Board, the preliminary plat was reviewed or approved in October. And then they went to final engineering, and the developer's engineer has met with our engineer on several occasions. Dave Preissig has conducted hours of review of the final engineering plans. Excuse me, we have met with residents in informal meetings on 2 or 3 occasions, at least 2 or 3, with the village engineer, myself, and the village administrator. And on top of that, the Stormwater Committee meeting earlier this month, where we spent a couple of hours with them, reviewing it once again with the residents and the neighbors.
Doug, this is a dry pond? I'm sorry, dry pond?
Yes,
So we won't have any Savoy-type ponds in there.
right.
Well, we discussed it for quite a while because of the concerns the resident had. And after a lot of input from all the parties involved, builders, engineers, and everything else, I know the resident wanted some kind of a guarantee that this or that can happen. And, well, we didn't say there was a guarantee, but when you look, there is nothing there now to keep the water from just flowing downhill. Trustee Francie and myself are very familiar with that area, living there for quite a while. But everything that is being planned for that area is definitely going to improve and help the situation. And that was the way I think we left it after that meeting, is that yes, this is an improvement, and yes, it does look like it will definitely help the situation.
Anything else? Trustee Schiappa?
Doug, can you explain to the public
the process the developer has to go through when obtaining a permit? They have to
Sure.
post.
Well, this approval of the final plat is the first or the final step before construction. And prior to this step, as I explained before, they have submitted their plans for review by the village staff, and that review has gone on for several months now. With this approval of the final plat tonight, then the developer will submit a letter of credit equal to 125% of the village engineer's approved estimate of the cost for making these improvements. That letter of credit will be a guarantee that the improvements will be properly completed. The developer will have 2 years to complete the subdivision improvements, including the stormwater pond, the street, the utilities, etc., and they cannot start construction of any houses until that stormwater management system is in place and is operational. And once the stormwater management system and the street and the utilities are in place and operational, then they can start building houses. If for any reason the developer fails to complete the improvements or doesn't complete them correctly, and for whatever reason we can't get it fixed, we have that letter of credit that the village can draw on instantly, more or less instantly, and go out there and make improvements or make fixes as needed. I don't expect that to happen. It doesn't typically happen. We have a builder who's very, very competent, and we're very confident they'll complete the improvements in compliance with the plans, but we always have that guarantee of a letter of credit that we can pull on at any time if there's any kind of failure. After that, after it's completed and homes are built, then the improvements are turned over to the homeowners association. Now, part of a new thing that the village instituted several years ago, and I believe this is the first subdivision where we've done this, or this is applied, is that the developer also has to leave an escrow account for the homeowners association, so that when the homeowners association takes over the improvements, they have money that the developer has set aside that is dedicated for maintaining the stormwater improvements. So that the association just isn't handed a maintenance responsibility. They're also handed money to make sure that they have the wherewithal to maintain it. There's also language in the easements that are recorded with the subdivision that says that the homeowners are responsible, and also says that if the homeowners fail for some reason at any point in perpetuity to maintain the stormwater system, the village can step in, fix it, and then charge, collect from the homeowners and put a lien on the property if necessary. So there's all kinds of belts and suspenders here to make sure that, as we do with all subdivisions, to make sure that the improvements are maintained properly.
Okay. Thank you, Doug.
Doug, if I may ask one more question, when will the stormwater improvements be made? Will it be before the spring rains? Because this resident who's complaining could technically get some water from the rain before any improvements have been made, right?
Well, when you start?
Our goal is to start construction on. My name is Bill McNaughton with McNaughton Brothers Construction. We're acting as the developer on the property for the owners of the property. We plan, with obviously approval from all of you, to start construction about the middle of March. And we anticipate that construction is going to take about 3 months to get completely installed. And in that same time frame, the individuals that are going to be residing there have already started architectural plans, and working with Doug, there's a certain point where he'll start accepting the review process of those construction plans, and the owners do hope to get into construction of the house right around that same June 15th to July deadline, or July, based on plans being approved by the village staff.
So if we have a really wet spring,
There's not much that
it's not the fault of this,
No,
because nothing has been done.
right now, you're
to
draining
improve.
5 acres due east, and if you look at the property now and where everything's draining to, it's literally 5 acres or almost 4.5 acres, I think, of direct drainage to the east, the way it sheds. So I think obviously getting erosion control up in place, getting, the start of this construction, and hopefully even getting it in by even earlier, mid-March at the latest, that's only going to help. But no, I can't control the water until the retention pond is pretty much dug in place and functioning to its capacity.
Okay.
I know David Price had asked, and we're going to have basically our pre-construction meetings, and he has already kind of asked us to maybe follow certain steps in maybe not the most correct order that a developer might take, but maybe try to focus on the retention pond first instead of maybe the road and the cul-de-sac, so that we can get some sort of drainage and protection for the neighbors as we start construction and going through construction.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of them? Okay. Trustee Francis?
Doug, are there any work being done at the subdivision to the south, specifically the lot and Cross Street that borders Brooks Glen South?
There's no work being done now. The subdivision improvements were completed. The village engineer has checked the adjacent property recently, found that it's in compliance with the approved subdivision engineering plans at this time.
We're going to keep an eye on it.
Correct. Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Doug. Are there any residents that would like to address this subject?
I'm Linda Enzano. I'm the resident everybody's talking about at 11794 Shagbark. I guess our concern is that, as he just stated, they're going to start in March. We get totally flooded in the spring. The spring is our worst season. We are getting all the water runoff. The minute they touch that ground and start ripping up any of the natural grass that's there now absorbing it, it's going to be all clay underneath it, and we're going to get flooded. So I personally think with what we've had, we haven't had a lot of snow, but we do get a lot of rain. And if you stand on my driveway, it is such a huge straight down pitch to our yard. That's all the area we just got done redoing. And according to Paul May, we went through all the village, had them approve everything. We had to totally regrade our entire yard and flatten it just to keep the water from running, in towards our house. So, regardless of them wanting to do this and starting in March, that's going to be our worst season. And if they rip up all of that grass, it's not going to absorb anything. So we're going to have total clay back there, and it's going to be a total runoff, just like the other subdivision was. And, we're not trying to stop the subdivision. We just can't have happen what the village allowed to happen for 5 years or whatever it was. And we never said anything. We've been picking up the expense of repairing everything for all these years. So we just don't want to see that happen again. We're not trying to cause a problem. We just don't want to be flooded. We don't want to have to come after anybody. We don't want to have anybody repair it. But someone has to look out for us this time. That's all we're asking. Thank you.
I think that's why I asked, how will it be phased so that something like this doesn't happen?
And that's what happened with before. The original developer cleared the land, and then he did not finish, and they left clay, and there was no control of the water, and the water just ran off. And because all of the natural stone from the old path is there, regardless if people say that it is now filled with mud and it's whatever, I'm not saying that that's not correct, but over the years, it's been running through the stone into our yard, which sunk the yard. Over time, you keep sinking, you're creating even a worse problem. So everything in our backyard entirely sunk by almost a foot, which ruined the deck, which ruined the foundation, which ruined the patios, and replaced 2 driveways. I'm on my 3rd driveway in 25 years. That's not normal. And we've done everything. We went from an asphalt driveway to a stone driveway to try to help the water absorb into the ground as it ran down so it wouldn't be a flood. And that didn't even help, because what it did is it caused the driveway to all move. So now you go to my driveway and you see a wave you can see the actual wave, the water pattern of the water running down my driveway like a river. So all we're asking is that the village really watch everything. I mean, we don't want to get flooded. And like I said, we've been a resident here. We bought our first lot here before it was even annexed into Burridge. We've been in here for, 8 years on the north side and now 26 on this side. So someone needs to just watch for us, okay? And we're not fighting against the developers, so we know a lot of the people that'll be moving there.
Okay, thank you, Linda, appreciate it. Trustee Francis?
Yes, I would ask that staff, particularly Mr. Pollock and Mr. Preissig, be cognizant of this critical time period from when the first shovel's put in the ground for the detention area to when it's fully operational and up and running and checked out and approved, that they keep on top of this and make sure that it's done expeditiously and that no delays are incurred beyond what Mother Nature causes, so that this critical time period when this detention stormwater management system is put in place and made operational is as short as possible to minimize the impact on the residents to the east. I know the developer will do his best as well. He's gone above and beyond a bare bones design to incorporate the concerns of the residents to the east. So I know he'll do his best. I would ask the village follow up and make sure that that does occur. Thank you.
In anticipation of the rains, I mean, is there any way that we can sandbag areas to try to get the water to go a certain way until we've got the pond put in? Or, I mean, I don't know if there's anything like that that would help. But just as a thought, in your thinking cap.
Well, the problem is, again, that it's draining 100% right now to the
Yeah.
east, so there's not much to do until we get that ginormous swimming pool dug.
Yeah.
So the water can go in there and collect over 70,000 cubic feet of water. Sandbags are not gonna do much, we'll obviously have silt fence up to protect erosion control, to redirect water because of where the land is going towards. I can't redirect it back up, though, water doesn't
Right,
flow.
right.
It'll take it to the south, which it just not gonna flow that way because of the topography of the land. The best thing that we can hope for is that get our approvals, be as a developer, gets everything in order, and, we get the machines out there to trees cleared efficiently, which, that's something that we're working on. Instead of having one developer for weeks, we could have multiple crews and try to bang out the tree removal and then start digging this pond. Once the pond is dug, even though it might not be tied into the overflow pipe and it might not be 100% completed, you're still gonna have an enormous hole, even if it's a mud hole, there that will capture water that is just sheet draining to the east, and it'll be catching. Obviously, the spring rains, we don't know what's gonna come. The last spring would have been the worst we've ever experienced. Hopefully, we don't have that situation. But again, we'll do the best we can from efficiency, not just us. Service, do it as efficient as possible, as well as it allows the owners to, once we get this project, this part of the development done, they can start building their homes, which is very important to them because they're trying to get in and capture that spring 17 movement. Therefore, I need to obviously break ground on these homes relatively quickly in order to be able to build in the winter. So, to answer your question, I don't know if there's anything we can do, sandbag, suppression of water, but getting in there and getting this hole dug, I think is going to alleviate most of their problems, or spring problems that they might have in order to capture the water.
Thank you. Okay, may I have a motion to approve 7A?
One more question from the audience.
They gotta come up to the microphone.
Linda, actually, I'm sorry, I really should have asked Bill to get to the microphone. I need you to come to the microphone as well. Any questions that should be asked, I really need to have it on the microphone so
Probably
the
stated
people
that.
watching
Just
can
have a quick
can hear it.
question. They're putting that piping along the whole property line. We have a lot of big oak trees all at the base of our property. At what point is there a decision made as to ripping up all the roots of the trees, and will they all die? And how close do they come to my property to do that? And what will be the effect of these trees dying? I mean, like, how close and how many of the roots do you rip up? I mean, how, they're going to be going on 285 feet of my property all the way down. Does that mean I'm going to lose every single tree in my backyard? Because they're coming
Dave?
that close to and ripping up the roots?
And I'll ask
Oh, that doesn't look
Linda.
good.
Linda, I'm going to ask Dave to answer this question.
That's a good question. And as you know, there's 20 feet of the easement that's back here, and that's where there's a water main installed and some other structure back there. So our water main's in that 20-foot easement, our trees are behind that, and they're putting that pipe on this side, so a drip line of an oak tree would probably not be affected
How many feet
by
off the
that.
property line?
Is the proposed pipe is I think, about 4 to 8 feet on the inside of the property line to catch the.
So there's a lot of trees, like right literally on the property line, which I was told they're all going to be ripped up.
I believe that most of those trees there are going to be ripped up because of the construction.
Because of the detention.
So all of the trees, the oak trees and all the big, huge trees in my backyard are all going to be ripped up.
We're not allowed to come onto your backyard. All of our work is going to be within the property known as bump trails.
So all of the roots will be ripped up, which will kill the trees.
I don't think any of the drip edge of a tree, I don't think any of your
Bill?
drip edge, I'm sorry.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, this is getting a little out of control here. Now, do you ask one question and then let Bill get up and?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't believe any of the drip edge of your trees encroaches into any of the earthwork that we are going to be completing on our property. There is one tree, one existing oak tree that would have liked to have been saved, but it's actually sitting like right in the middle of or right on the crest of the retention pond. That tree, but clearly on our property, and that tree, after working with the forester, is not going to make it. So to answer your question, I don't believe any of your critical root zone is encroaching into Buck Trail's property. So therefore, it won't be cut.
Well, I mean, you hate to have that, and you have all these years, you know, if it's in that.
Thank you, Bill. Now, do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Bolus?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
6-0.
The motion passes 6-0. Thank you for everyone's participation and communication on this very important topic. It was certainly a long road, and I wish the developer and the future owners the best of luck. So, under considerations, we have 8A, discussion concerning proposed tax levy referendum for November 2016.
Right. The board briefly discussed this issue at their workshop on January 25th. As we've discussed, future funding for the annual road program as well as other capital improvements such as sidewalks, sewer projects, other infrastructure projects must be addressed. What I would like to tell the residents as you follow along, and I think the board members really understand this, but that you know, our budget overall, and when I say budget, our operating budget, our general fund budget is sound. We will have a substantial surplus going into fiscal year 16-17 due to some one-time revenues that, you know, we'll discuss during the budget process. But, you know, as we look forward into the future years, and you can see on this chart here, that in future years we show significant deficits in the general fund. And the reason for that is directly tied to the fact that the annual road program, the program the village is very proud of as we maintain our roads using, you know, not taxing the residents, but directly for that, but, you know, finding other revenue sources. Those revenue sources have basically dried up. And as you can see, this last where it says road program here, this is in the central services budget. You see that in future years, those are the dollar amounts that we need to transfer from the general fund to the capital projects fund just to maintain our road program. Not talking about any additional sidewalk projects or any additional stormwater projects. This is just for the road program. And you can see that alone, that one line item alone, puts us in a deficit situation in all future years. Again, the reason why is that there is not a dedicated source of revenue for the road program other than the motor fuel tax, which is just around $250,000 a year or so. And when we have this year $1 million road program, and in most years at least a $750,000 road program, there just isn't sufficient revenues to pay for the cost. You know, you look at the revenues, they remain flat in the general fund while expenditures continue to rise. We have this continuing threat, although it's been abated a little bit at this point, but it's still on an annual basis. We keep hearing about the idea that the state will take away our portion of our state income tax, which is over $1 million. They're talking about 50% of that, or over $500,000. Again, we talked about the projections showing deficits, and just simply not enough revenue to cover the potential future costs. You know, enough to maintain the normal operating expenses of the village, but not enough to cover capital projects as well. And as I mentioned, this is the only source is motor fuel tax. And again, as we know, sidewalk fund is drying up. That fund, the dollars from that fund come from developers. We haven't had a lot of new subdivisions, and therefore not a lot of new revenue going into the sidewalk fund. So where would we find this additional revenue source? One potential opportunity is the fact that our Lake Michigan bond issue expires at the end of 2016. That's the bond issue it's a general obligation bond. It's paid by the property tax for the extension of Lake Michigan water years ago from Bedford Park to the village of Burr Ridge. The tax amount that the residents currently pay for this bond issue, valued at a $600,000 home, is about less than $100 for community residents, in DuPage County, and about $130 for homes in Cook County. The bond and interest levy currently generates $520,655 a year. And so I asked the question as your village administrator, could this be the new source of revenue that we need? Again, what I'm showing here is a possible solution to the issue of trying to find additional revenue for roads and other infrastructure going forward in the village as the village gets older, and other infrastructure type needs such as not only roads, but as I mentioned, sidewalks. We have a lot of bridges tied to those sidewalks and so forth. Storm sewer projects in the future. And we just had a water committee meeting, and there's water projects that we know are going to be coming forward in the future. Where are we going to find that additional revenue? Again, is a possible solution transferring this debt service levy and turning it into an infrastructure levy using the same exact dollar amounts. And so this is what we're talking about. Again, the numbers on the left-hand side show exactly the tax levy that was just approved by the village board in 2015. You can see the three levies, the corporate police protection and police pension levies, and then the bond and interest levy that I'm talking about that generates that $520,655. That goes away after next year. But if we were to ask the residents through a referendum to turn that debt service levy into an infrastructure levy, we could just move that line item as the fourth line item under our normal levies, call it an infrastructure levy at this point, ask for the exact same amount of money, the exact same amount of money that residents are currently paying. And by doing so, there would be absolutely no increase on anybody's tax bill in the village of Burr Ridge. Again, this would provide a continuing revenue source for the infrastructure projects that I've been talking about: roads, sidewalks, storm water projects, potentially water projects, etc. Again, this chart, I think, kind of shows it all. Simply moving what was known as the bond and interest levy up until, what the residents are currently paying up until December of this year. And in December of 2016, assuming that in November of 2016, a referendum would be approved, we would just simply transfer that line item, and the residents would pay exactly the same amount that they're currently paying for that particular issue, in the amount of $520,655. And I just remind you that, yes, tax levies do go up. This past year was 0.8%. And again, as we've talked about in the past, the village's tax levy, including this bond and interest levy, including what would be turned into an infrastructure levy, represents less than 3% of your tax bill as a Burr Ridge resident. Less than 3%. So that's really what we're talking about here. Obviously, the money would go toward continuing to be able to maintain our road program and other infrastructure programs as the village ages. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board has. What I'd be looking for is some direction. Do you feel that this is something that we should pursue? And if so, I would entertain a motion once discussion is completed to direct the staff to prepare the necessary ordinance so that you can see exactly what the question would look like, and that would be allowed to be placed on the November ballot.
Trustees? Trustee Schiappa?
So the referendum, we're just voting to put a question on the ballot to ask the residents if they would approve this infrastructure. Okay.
Trustee Murphy, you want to weigh in?
Well, I think it would be nice to be able to give the residents a tax decrease, of course, as the bond expires. But I also realize that we need the money for the road program, and we also need to continue paying for the police pension and the other things that are in the budget. So it sounds like this is a good solution that people really wouldn't feel that much. So I would be okay with doing this.
Trustee Bolus?
I'm supportive of this as long as we do call it an infrastructure and don't commit it just to the road program. We have an aging infrastructure in water mains and in the village, so if we're able to use the funds in more than just patching potholes, I would be very much in favor of this.
Trustee Paveza?
When it was first approached, when the village administrator first approached it, I had my doubts. But as I look back over everything, I realized that the village in the past has done a couple of things. One, it's been well-run, we're financially sound, we've had balanced budgets, and we've got money in the bank for rainy day or emergency funds. But one of the main impetus for doing this is slowly coming to a halt. Our forefathers thought enough in the past to put an impact fee on developers and builders. And as Burr Ridge is being built out, these impact fees aren't coming in the way they used to. So again, we've got to think of a way to make up that money. And because money had come in over the years, as the administrator said, people come to us all the time and complain about their tax bills. But the one thing we want them to realize is that our portion, the village's portion, is less than 3%. You're getting everything out here. You know, we've got a top-rated police department, top-rated, I mean, you go right down the list, and we're constantly being rated as one of the top villages. And when you look at our less than 3%, we're probably one of the lowest in all the suburbs. So the more I thought about this and realized that this year Burr Ridge is 60 years old. it's going to get older, and infrastructure has to be replaced. And the more I think about it, I think this is almost the perfect way of doing it without any increase in taxes, and to keep our high standards intact.
Mr. Grasso?
I agree.
That's the shortest speech I've heard so far. Trustee Francis, any questions
I
of
agree with
Steve?
Trustee Pavesa. We're fortunate to have a great police department, great roads, a great village staff, a well-run village, an efficiently run village. I have several questions about this. It seems like the road program is the bad guy causing the deficit here. So if this were to be come to referendum and this were to be approved by the residents, then other entities besides the road program would pile on and benefit from them, namely sidewalks and stormwater management. I don't think that's fair to the road program. We're blessed to have wonderful roads here in the village that everybody benefits from. The residents, the business owners, the business customers, the employees, the people that shop here, the people that dine here, everybody benefits from the road program. And so I would like to see this restricted to the road program if it were to pass. A couple questions about some of the math here. Could you go back to that, a few screens back where you had the projected deficits? Where did those projected deficits come from?
Well, again, you look at this is our current projection of the budget.
The current budget projection, okay.
That you will
Thank
see on Friday, actually. Now, these numbers may change a few dollars here or there as we're finalizing the numbers. But this kind of shows, and if you looked at last year's budget, you would have seen it in there as well.
Yes.
So, those numbers didn't change much, and they're still there. And again, they're directly attributable to the road program.
So the road program went up 230-some thousand, $40,000-some thousand from 16, 17 to 17, 18?
No, what happened is that we were using one-time revenues.
Yes.
In the road program for the last few years. And those dollars have been exhausted. So this is, and I told you this a year or two ago, that we would run out of those dollars after this fiscal year.
Okay.
And then we would start with deficits in fiscal year 17, 18. That's panned out to be just that way.
So if I could go back to your hypothetical example of a $600,000 home. Let's say that property taxes are $10,000 per year. I don't know what they are. And the village portion of those $10,000 property taxes are 3% or $300. And you said that $100 of money that comes into the village from a typical $600,000 home goes to the paying off that debt service for the water main extension. So 1/3 of what came into the village goes to pay for that debt service on that, what was incurred for the water project back in the 1990s, which certainly all the residents have benefited from. So in the future, then 1/3 of that 3% would then go to the road program or the infrastructure improvements. So am I getting the math right here?
Yes.
Just so the residents can understand? Okay, thank you. Trustee Bolos mentioned something very important, and so did Trustee Pavesa, and that was about the water service that we have in the village. The village is 60 years old this year. We have 55-year-old water mains, and they're failing. And we talked about this earlier, about how those infrastructure improvements could possibly come out of a water rate, out of the water bills, and a water rate increase. And has that been explored at all in the water committee?
We've talked about it. A lot of the improvements can be picked up. The one thing that we're not sure of, and it was brought up at the water meeting that we had prior to the minutes, to this meeting, is how we would propose major repairs, such as carriageway.
Yep.
If we have to go in and repair all the, put in new pipes, we're talking millions. There's no way that can be set up. And the one thing that we talked about is when something like that happens, and we're not near it now, we're many, many years away from that, but we are looking at it, and we are looking at a method that can be used to pay for such an item. And one of the things we've asked staff to get at is how do other villages handle it when they have to make a major repair? Now, what we have is, and this is something that we're gonna have to think on how to form it, how to pay for it. You've got Carriageway, which is 60-plus years old and way before anybody else's. Like the subdivision we lived in is barely 30 years old. So you've got that, and some of the new ones are even less than that. So down the road, that's going to be a touchy subject for the trustees and staff on how they're going to handle some. But again, that's not something that's got to be done in the next few years, but it is something that we are looking at.
Something we need to be talking about, and I agree with that. We need to be talking about it now, so
Right, we are.
Be prepared for the future, because there will be a catastrophic failure at some point, and
Yeah, because that was one of the things we talked to our previous man, Paul White and Paul May, and with our current one, and basically, definitely, they concur that repairing the leaks right now is way less than going into a major construction problem.
absolutely.
Anything else?
Steve, would there be any public discussion prior to the referendum?
Well, I hope that we would hold special meetings, definitely on this. I hope that we would do a newsletter, and again, it would be a factual newsletter. It certainly wouldn't be one to endorse. It would be one to simply provide facts. And I would hope that, those who are experienced with referendums, I know Diana's experienced with those, and you know that, and Al from the water referendum, that it's important that, residents get involved, that come out and support, the referendum, let their fellow residents know that this is important. We've held one homeowner association meeting. We broached the subject with them. We hope to be able to do that again in the future, bring out even more people, to discuss the facts behind this and gains people's support. The old adage is you never put a referendum on a presidential election because the turnout is so large, but the reason for that is simply because it's just the timing of the old levy goes away, and this would be a way to just continue at the same rate. And so that's why it needs to be done at this point in time. So again, I think we have a good answer to the issues. I think we're doing this appropriately and prudently, and I'm hopeful that the residents will understand what we're trying to accomplish here for them, and that they will support it.
When you mentioned that it was discussed at a homeowners association meeting, how was it received?
I think it was received well. Again, this is the first time they're hearing it. They don't have all the background that we have. Right. But from the little that we're able to discuss it, we did ask for a show of hands, and the vast majority, were in favor. Nobody came out and said they were opposed to it. A few said, I'd like more information before I tell you which way I would go. But it seemed like the vast majority understood it right away and understood that this was definitely something that we should pursue.
Actually, on that note, the homeowner association presidents prompted Steve and I to take a vote, and by showing of hands, because other than that, it was just a presentation of the materials, and it was overwhelming. They encouraged it, they supported it, but there were either affirmatives, no negatives, but there were a few abstentions waiting for additional information, which is certainly a great idea because everybody needs to be informed on this, and having numerous public agenda or meetings would be a great idea to get the word out and to get the feel of the residents.
How would these funds that are collected be restricted to roads, sidewalks, or stormwater management?
Well, again, there's a difference of opinion I'm hearing here. as to how we could restrict it by the question
Okay.
that, would be posed. I got the impression we wanted to be as flexible as possible in terms of infrastructure. And then on an annual basis, it would be the village board at the time to make that decision as to where do those dollars go. And I've said for years that in the future, for example, that sidewalks would have to compete with roads for the same dollars.
Yep.
And as those dollars in the sidewalk fund dry up, and there's a desire for additional sidewalks, or just maintaining the existing sidewalks, priorities will have to be
Sure.
developed by the committees, to ultimately decide that. But again, I've heard that you like to restrict it to roads. I've heard others saying, well, we want it to be more flexible. I need some direction if that's the way we want to go, because that'll be how we frame the question.
That's why I'm asking the question here, because I'd hate to see it squandered on gateway improvements or more lighting somewhere or something like that. Those are infrastructure things.
I don't think that would be, I agree with you, I don't think that would be considered infrastructure. I think infrastructure does have a more narrow usage, and, I mean.
You and I agree on that.
And I think that we're not looking to spend it on new items. We're basically, anyway, the way I envision it too, and like I just talked about, we're aging. We've got to repair the stuff that's aging, not to use that money for new items. I don't have a problem with infrastructure, but I think the board has been good in the past, and I think it'll continue to appropriate the money that's in the best interest for the village.
And we do have a funding source for gateway projects in the hotel motel tax fund, and that's what we've always used that money for. And again, all the improvements that we've made over the years come from that fund, not from this fund, not from the general fund, not from capital projects.
Actually, I would like to ask Trustee Bowles a question. Trustee Bowles, as you indicated that you'd like to have it a little broader than just roads. What kind of wording might you recommend for that type of?
I don't have the legal knowledge to do that,
Well,
but I would just definitely, I agree with Trustee Franzese, so it's not frivolously spent. So maybe a definition around infrastructure, I honestly don't know. It's very careful how to word a referendum.
Maybe primarily for roadways, but leave it open for other purposes?
That would go to our
Other
lawyer as to
infrastructure.
how to,
Just thought I'd ask.
yeah.
Trustee Grosso?
Tonight, can we agree that we are going to put it to a referendum vote and yet worry about what the wording is going to be at a later date? When do you have to have the wording?
No, what I'm asking for is just to direct the staff to prepare the ordinance.
Okay.
So you wouldn't be agreeing tonight, you would just be directing me to prepare the ordinance. So you would see that ordinance up front, and you'd see that question. And then you would be voting on that specific question, because that's what goes on the ballot. And so, we have time, we have plenty of time. But this gets the ball rolling, I guess is what I'm saying.
I'd like to get the ball rolling.
Can we get a
And then make
version of the question?
Trustee Francis?
Yeah, sure.
So it's going to be more difficult for you, Steve, because you're going to have to explain the cause, the benefit, the cost and benefit for every project, whether it's stormwater, sidewalks, roads, that comes before this board, to see that these residents get the biggest bang for their buck. Right?
Well, there's limited dollars. Even with
exactly.
these additional dollars, we're still
Still gonna be
limited.
limited dollars,
And there's
exactly.
always going to be more projects than there's
There's gonna be
dollars.
limited dollars, but there's more dollars, but now there's more projects. Now all the sidewalk projects get rolled in, and the stormwater projects get rolled in.
Well, again, that's.
So we're gonna spend a lot more time.
Yeah.
And rightly so, to establish the cost and benefit for these projects and the biggest bang for the buck for the residents.
Absolutely.
I think it's, what we've done in the past, and I don't see a problem with that
No, I
in
don't
the
either.
future.
I don't either, so.
Trustee Murphy?
My question, is this an ongoing thing that you see this levy continuing year after year, or are you thinking this is fine, like 5 years, 10 years?
No, well, I mean, you could sunset it if you
Yeah.
wanted to, but again, I think my feeling is that the roads aren't going to, it's a continual maintenance program that you have to have, and you're going to need these dollars going forward. And again, as Trustee Francis was saying, with this 500 plus the 250, it's only $750,000. And it sounds like a lot of money, but we traditionally were spending over $1 million a year. This year, we're spending close to $1 million a year. But in the past years, we were spending $1 million a year on the road program. So even at $750,000, it's going to be less than what we were doing, say, 7, 10, 15 years ago. But with more things, with more desires to, do potentially sidewalk projects in the future to maintain the existing sidewalks going forward, let alone any stormwater improvements that could be done. So we're not talking about a lot of money, but we're certainly talking about taking the pressure off the general fund so that there is funding available.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Do I have a motion to direct staff? Yes?
Just a final comment. So now that you explained it, I would then be receptive to roads, sidewalks, and stormwater management. So.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And do I have a motion to direct staff to
Sure, I'll make a motion. Direct the staff to formulate a referendum question that would talk about infrastructure levy, that would include roads, stormwater, sidewalks, and unless you can think of another subsection that might cover it.
Second.
motion second? Roll call, please.
Trustee Grasso.
Yes?
Trustee Murphy.
Yes.
Trustee Schiappa.
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Baveza.
Yes.
Trustee Bolus.
Yes.
6-0.
Okay, is that subject to be continued? Also, under considerations, we have 8B, consideration of request to purchase village property, the 8.6 acre property north of the village pump center, facility located German Church Road. Steve?
Yes, we have received a letter from a broker representing a resident of Burr Ridge interested in purchasing our approximately 8.5 acre property located directly north of the village's pump center at 11680 German Church Road. We've been told that the client would be interested in purchasing the property and with no zoning change, but only after a new appraisal has been conducted. The current appraisal was done back in 2007. The appraised value was $2,445,000. Normally speaking, after 9 years, an appraisal would be stale. You would assume that the value of property would increase, but in this climate, I think the common assumption is that property is worth less than what was originally appraised back then. And obviously that's why there hasn't been a lot of interest. And other than from Pulte Homes, who you remember a year or two ago came forward and said that they would pay that asking price if they were provided zoning similar to that which was provided to the Savoy Club. I have talked to the appraiser that did this last appraisal. He definitely stated that if the property was zoned for 1 acre lots, which is currently what it is zoned for, it would be not as valuable if it was zoned for the Savoy Club type development. To be honest, I've always recommended that we not go forward with an appraisal, even though I understood that the old appraisal was stale, simply because I wanted to get the asking price and get the highest amount we possibly could. But it doesn't seem that that's really happening at this point. But I'd hate to, and again, just because we get an appraisal doesn't mean we have to sell it. You can decide, well, maybe we ought to hold it for a while. And so the public understands the main reason why we want to sell this parcel and another parcel we put on the market at the same time, which is down at Rustic Acres, was so that the proceeds of that sale could be used to pay off the debt for the police department, which is around we need another $3 million or so for that, and then we could pay that off 100%. And that was the Rustic Acres facility, which was valued back then at $1.875 million. So what I would suggest, if you want to do the appraisal, is to have it done both ways, both as what the current zoning is, and then what it could be with no more density than the Savoy Club, which is around 2 units an acre. That's all we're talking about. And it would cost more to do both than just the one, but it would give you an idea if, how much of a difference we're talking about, and it would maybe help you determine whether or not you want to put it back on the market or not. The cost, of an appraisal, he suggested it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 to 5. What I would do if you directed me would be to get some proposals from 2 or 3 local appraisers and then bring those back to you, and then you can make a final decision to pull the trigger, but I can at least give you some numbers.
I think if we appraise it, we should appraise it both ways, and just so we have an idea of the difference with the different zoning.
Do you have somebody interested in buying it with the current zoning? So I don't see really why you would get 2 appraisals.
Well, if it costs X for the existing zoning, and he buys it, and he owns the property next door, and he now controls that land, and let's say 2 or 3 years from now, he says, you know what, I want to now come back and ask for a zoning change, and we sold it at the lower cost. See, and I mean, you need to take that in consideration. Maybe you don't care if we get close to that 2.4 million, and if we were to move forward, and I would suggest if you do one, you do both at the same time, because we should know what the Rustic Acres property is worth as well, and if we could sell them both and come up with that 3.1 million that we need anyway, then fine, then we've met our objective, we can pay off the police facility, and we're good to go. I just hate to leave dollars on the table, I guess is my concern, that somehow we're selling a piece of property today under the new appraisal that may someday be worth more, in the future. So obviously, this person wants to buy it now when it's less money, and then develop it maybe later on when it's worth more money. And he wouldn't be asking, nobody would be asking to buy property. No developer wants to buy property unless they think they're going to make a profit sometime in the future. But if he has the dollars and the wherewithal to hold on to it for a few years, he would make the profit.
Hopefully, it would increase in value either way, whether we own it or he owns it.
But as a village, as a property owner, we also have the same choice.
Correct.
We could sit on it,
That's exactly
waiting
right.
for it, and this does not require us to sell it. It just requires, it gets more information on which to base that discussion. Yes. Trustee Murphy, you got something else you want to add?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Trustee Bolus?
We have been around and around with this piece of property when Pulte wanted it. The Plan Commission decided, as well as the board at that time, that 40,000 square foot lots was the appropriate zoning for that area with the housing that is around it. To make it more dense is completely changing the flavor of Burr Ridge. If we get that other zoning, then, and sell it for that, we have completely changed what Burr Ridge is. We don't need that kind of density right there. The Plan Commission, as well as the board at the time, and you can all remember the discussions going on and on ad nauseum. 40,000 square foot lots were determined to be the correct zoning for that. So I'm in favor of getting the appraisal for the 40,000 square foot lots, not both appraisals. And I would agree with getting the other piece zoned at the higher density and appraised at the higher density.
I agree.
Anyone else?
What's the difference in the cost to have it appraised in both densities?
Well, he suggested, maybe another 1,500, 2,000 to do both.
I just think it's a cost of doing business. I mean, we have these properties that are valuable. I think we should know what we're dealing with, and if it means we have to have 2 appraisals, have 2 appraisals done at the same time.
So you're saying you agree to higher density in that area?
I think I made a mistake voting for the lower density when I voted.
With all the surrounding housing
Yeah.
that is there?
I believe there were some other areas that were zoned differently around it. I don't recall exactly, but that's my recollection.
Well, the question.
But that doesn't mean it's changing, but it's just.
The question is, this is a whole different question.
Yeah.
The question is,
Yeah.
Do we want to have it appraised? And if so, as it's currently zoned, or as the two different scenarios?
Well, I think, we're not voting to change the zoning. We're voting to just get an appraisal. And then we're talking, what, about extra 1,500? Something like that?
Well, we'll see. If you direct me, I'll get proposals.
Yeah, I would get the two proposals for both areas, just so we have it in our hands, because like the comment was made, the builder knows what the zoning is now, but how many times in the past have these builders come in for either half acre or 30,000 foot lots at some point down the road? So I'd just like to have that information available.
I think you're going down a dangerous path, because once you see the higher amount, you're going to want it.
Trustee Francis?
This is a builder making this request for, making this purchase offer?
No, this is a property owner who's
Property
not-
owner to
who's
the
not-
east.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
not a builder.
Trustee Bolos said it quite well. The Plan Commission voted for the R2A density, voted to recommend the R2A zoning. This board agreed. And also the residents. The residents of Greystone Court, the residents of Arrowhead Farms, residents of Burroughs Glen South, it all came out in support of this less dense zoning. So why we would go back and entertain the thought of a cluster home development when that was not what the residents, the neighbors want? So.
Maybe, I think.
And to some extent, it may be giving false hope.
Exactly, be false hope, and we've heard from the residents. They've spoken what they wanted to say. They want the R2A zoning for this piece of property, and we should market it that way. And we know that if it's zoned something more dense, it's going to have a higher value. We know that. Not kidding anybody. But do we sit on it for another year and incur another $500-some thousand in debt service to the police station, or do we sell it, cut it, and get the best we can for right now, best buck we can for right now, and move on, and cut that debt service in half, free up half of that $525,000 and put it towards pathways and storm sewers and roads.
Well, maybe we shouldn't get it appraised then. If you want to go back and look at what you thought or what it was appraised for before, if we have it appraised at the lower density, and then we feel like that is the most we can ask for that property, which of course it isn't. You can ask for more than what it's appraised for, but it's more difficult, right? Just like your home. You have your home appraised. It may be difficult to ask for more than that if you put it on the market, right? So if it was appraised for more 5 years ago, you could say, all right, I'll lower it 100,000 or whatever, right? And put your house on the market for that. I was just thinking if we have it appraised at both, you might be able to ask a little more than the higher density appraisal would show. And the village might get more money for the lot, even if it was never reappraised. So that was just my thought, that do you only want to ask, do you want to top off your asking price at whatever that appraisal comes in?
I have a question.
Interesting. Okay, anyone else? Trustee Murphy?
Do we have any information about other properties in the area that have sold? Like the 5 acre, any other properties of similar size? What have they sold for recently?
I don't, that's what an appraiser does. He knows the markets, he gets that
What about
information.
talking to a real estate agent?
Well, I've talked to developers, and there's no question that they look at the asking price that we're asking for, especially for 1 acre lots, and they couldn't make it work. Now, some have suggested that, well, if the village becomes a partner and we hold the land and they develop it, they put in the infrastructure and then we split the costs, that's a potential thing that we could do. And then we hold it, not the bank, and then if they can't sell, then you know how it happens there, but we wouldn't have to worry about it because we would, we own the land already. Yeah, I don't have a good handle on what properties sold for recently. That's what an appraiser does.
I think I'd like to hear from a real estate agent on what they think that property is worth and what has sold recently in the area.
Right, and also
We're
what's.
That's
what-
what I would do if I were selling my house. I wouldn't
Well, I
look at
understand
the
that, but
I mean, I'd look at the appraisal number, but that wouldn't be like the top number I would use.
But legally, again, this is the village, and legally, we have to have an appraisal. We can't just go by hearsay and say, well, it sounds like it should be this, and we'll put it on the market for that. We have to have we have to have a formal appraisal. And you can't sell it for any, you have to sell it for 90% of the appraised value of that land. You could always sell it for more. The property may come down to the point where that would be of interest to more than one property, or one particular buyer, and maybe there'll be a bidding war and it'll go back up a little bit. But we have to have a threshold number, and that has to be done legally through an appraisal.
Well, I'm not saying we shouldn't have it appraised. I was just saying I support the appraisal at the current zoning. And I also would like to see numbers from a real estate agent on what the market value they think the property is worth.
Yeah, certainly, a couple of years ago, it was obviously a lot softer than it is right now. The market's heating up, and it could be in greater demand than even what I know the property around it sold for, because it could be in greater demand. We won't know unless it's appraised.
Again, I've talked to developers, and they don't have an interest in building 1 acre lots at this point. I've talked to a few of them, and they're just not a lot of interest.
But you have a buyer who's interested in this property, right?
At the current zoning.
At the right price. He wants to know what the right price is and what the real price is, and whether it's zoned for, I have a feeling, and I don't know for sure, but I have a feeling that whether it's zoned for what it is zoned for currently, or what the number would be if it was zoned at a higher density, still, both numbers will be less than the $2.4 million number that's currently out there today. The number we could have received if we had approved the Pulte development. Obviously, that's gone by the wayside now, and so again, I'm just asking the question, and it sounds like you said that you just want it to be zoned the way it's zoned and no change.
Yep.
And I heard Diane say the same thing, and I think I heard Guy say the same thing, but I don't know what the rest of you.
Well, the question really isn't about the zoning. The question is, do we want an appraisal, and do we want to sell the property?
Well,
So
It's how detailed of an appraisal is the question.
Right, and it's, does anybody have anything else to add or question, Steve, on this? Steve?
Well, what I could just simply suggest, if you direct me to get numbers, I mean, I'll go ahead and get costs from the appraisal to do it both ways. And then you can make a final decision if you want to spend the extra money to do the other appraisal. If it comes in higher than you're anticipating, maybe you don't want to do it at all. If it's only a few $100, it may be worth
doing both ways.
doing.
So you're asking for potentially getting approval for just for an estimate for what an appraisal would cost to do it as currently zoned or as it's zoned and simultaneously a denser property.
See what the appraisers tell us. And again, I would like to do both properties, both the Rustic Acres and the Pump Center, just so we have new numbers. And then I'll talk to some realtors and see if they'll give me any idea of what they think. Most realtors are in the selling of home business, not necessarily the selling of lot business, but there may be a look at some comps that they have, and they could give me some kind of idea.
Well, Dawn McKenna is a good friend of mine, so I'll check with her as well. And she's the top agent in this market.
Okay.
I really don't think there's any reason to know what the cost of the higher density is. This is not a direction that piece of property should go into.
I think it's a backdoor mover on the residents that support the R2A.
Sure.
And I can't support getting a second appraisal at the higher density.
Do I have any motion on the table yet right now?
I move that we get an appraisal for the Rustic Acres property not Rustic Acres, the pump station property at the 40,000 square foot lot, current zoning, and for Rustic Acres at the, where is it, higher density? How did you put that? and for the Rustic Acres property.
Just the higher density of rustic acres or higher and lower?
I'm trying to find the exact wording as to how it was.
Well, I suggest it's zoned R1, but I suggest it probably be zoned R3.
R3 is
Now,
probably reasonable.
what we said years ago, before you were on the board, but when we first put this on the market, we talked about the idea that certainly wouldn't be any more dense than the townhome development directly, to the north, and at the same level. And I think that's more than 2 units an acre. That may be closer to 3 or so. But again, I think 20,000 square foot lots is fine.
At 2 units per acre.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Bolas?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Other considerations for announcement, deliberation, and/or discussion? No official action will be taken.
I just want to let the residents know that at the next board meeting on March 14th, Commonwealth Edison will be here. They'll be making a presentation regarding the installation of smart meters. So this is an important meeting to learn more about how that whole process will work. It's all going to happen in the year 2016, starting probably in the spring. It's good news to have these smart meters in place, and you'll learn all about it hopefully at the next meeting.
Trustee Pavesa?
Just a reminder, this, what is it, March 9th, the Secretary of State is going to be here, starting, 9 a.m., 10 a.m. in the morning. So if you have any paperwork or renewals that you need, come to the Village Hall and talk to the Secretary of State people. It's Wednesday, March 9th.
Anyone else? Now the residents' comments section. Are there any residents that would like to address the board at this time? Okay, any reports and communications from village officials?
I have one. On March 5th, the Community House is hosting a Band Together in support of the Willowbrook Youth Learning Program, the Willowbrook Corner. The Willowbrook Corner is what the Community House does. It offers vital educational and recreational opportunities to the children and families residing in the low-income Willowbrook Corner neighborhood. And the vision of the program is to provide support and educational enhancement resources for the youth academic success, career readiness, and the leadership development. And the Community House is sponsoring an event, and all proceeds will go towards that program. And it is on March 5th, and you can go to the Community House website to get more information.
Any other reports? Now the non-resident section. Are there any non-residents that would like to address the board at this time?
Steve, before I start, will you put up that plaque of McNaughton?
Okay? Oops.
First of all, excuse me, Dolores Caesar, former trustee and former resident. I'd like to follow up on Mr. Sticker's comment that you have to have a formal appraisal on a property. That's true. But in the case of the parcel across the street, where you bought 3 parcels for the police station, the formal appraisal didn't mean anything because the village spent $883,000 plus all the ancillary costs, which brought it up to almost $1 million. And what the village paid for those 3 parcels was 72% more than a formal appraisal than the village had done the previous year. So how is a formal appraisal helpful? I have the documents at home.
Well, because, Dolores, we were buying property, here we're selling property, the rules are different.
With respect to the referendum to pay for infrastructure, I was on the board in 1996 when the board voted to get Chicago water from Bedford Park. And the GOB was a temporary a temporary tax increase for 20 years. And at the end of 20 years, it's supposed to go back to what it was before. You want to make a temporary tax permanent. Now, this village was paying for infrastructure before we had the bond for the water. So we were getting money for the infrastructure at that time. Now, I'll go back to one thing we can agree on. That parcel is landlocked. I agree. However, in my judgment, as a short-term Plan Commission member and as a 14-year trustee, I think this Village Plan Commission and Village Board made a tremendous mistake tonight in approving McNaughton's development. And my reason for saying that is, if you go back to the subdivision ordinance update, which was August of 2000, Section 7, C3, a provision has been added requiring that all lots, including detention outlots, have access to a public street. Now, do you really think that a 10-foot easement right here, a 10-foot easement, do you think that that qualifies as access to a public street? The outlot should have been lot number 1, which is smaller than the outlot A. And I don't understand how the Plan Commission could miss this, how the Village Board could miss this.
Talked about.
Let me read some more of this summary. Stormwater detention and retention basins should be located within outlots as required by Section 7I herein. Now, outlots for stormwater detention and other purposes shall be provided with public street frontage as required by the zoning ordinance for private lots. I think that means more than 10 feet. Regulations for location of stormwater management facilities. Stormwater detention areas, including stormwater detention and retention ponds, shall be located in outlots and shall not be on individual lots or behind the rear yards of individual lots. This is behind the rear yards of some lots. It seems to me that the consequence of what you did tonight is setting a precedent that any developer who has a landlocked parcel is going to say, oh, I can have 10 feet access to a public street, and that will qualify me.
Doris,
think about
Doris,
that.
I want to warn you that the 5 minutes is
Done.
up. When you want to wrap it up? Or do you have a few final comments you'd like to add? Okay, hearing none, are there anyone like to reply to any of that? Or? Okay.
Well, obviously, it was engineered, looked at, it was felt that the best location for the outlot was in the rear of the property because of the severe slope of the land. And again, from an engineering standpoint, we felt that was the best location, and a variation was granted.
Well, that's what I was going to, thank you. I was going to add that. Nothing was missed. The Plan Commission was made aware of the variation that was requested by the developer. Village engineer said to get the best, most effective stormwater on this property, the detention pond needs to be where it's located. Everyone was aware of that before anything was approved in 2015, so we were fully aware of all that. Thanks.
Thank you, Doug. Any other non-residents like to address the board? Okay, Well, the board needs to go into closed session to discuss the following items. The approval of closed session minutes of February 8, 2016, employment of an employee, and C, the deliberation of salary schedules and benefits for one or more classes of employees. I'm going to ask for a motion to go into closed session, and then ask everyone, of course, once that happens, you'll need to leave the boardroom. Have a motion to go into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call?
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Murphy?
Yes.
Trustee Bolas?
Yes.
Trustee Paveza?
Yes.
Trustee Grasso?
Yes.
6-0.
Okay, motion passes 6-0. We are officially in closed session.